for joining us this morning for our very first Train the Trainer session. My name is Elena Chia, and I work at the Fraser Basin Council with my coworker, Tom Welfare. You can see his picture up on the screen. And both of us are working with Richard Hall on Train the Trainer. And as I mentioned, this is our very first session, House as a System, of our series. And a note that this webinar is going to be recorded. We're hoping to have it as a resource for others who are interested and those who weren't able to join today. But the breakout discussions that we'll have later on in this meeting won't be recorded. So next slide. So I wanted to start with an acknowledgement that I am now calling in and living and working and playing from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Kwantlen, and Tsawwassen nations, otherwise known as Richmond. I included this image that I took from one of my favorite spots in the city, and I feel really grateful to be able to live on this land. And as a settler, I strongly believe that I have a responsibility to learn about Indigenous history, about the colonial history of Canada, and to work with Indigenous peoples in supporting their calls to action towards reconciliation and decolonization. And I also wanted to spend a moment to acknowledge the news that came out yesterday from Coesis First Nations and the discovery of the 751 unmarked graves at the Maryville Residential School. I know that there are probably many people on this call who are carrying this news quite heavily and could be struggling with it. So if anytime in the session in the next few hours, if you need to step away for a bit, if you want to turn off your camera, if you need some extra time and space, please do that. Feel free to do whatever you need to take care of yourself during the session. And if there's anything that I or Tom can do to support you, you can private message us and we'll do what the best we can. So thank you very much for your presence here, for taking the time out of your very busy day and participating in this training. I mentioned before that myself and Tom were part of the Fraser Basin Council, or FBC. And for those on the call who haven't heard of us before, we are a nonprofit organization and we work on collaboration on sustainability programs. And despite our name, we work across BC. You'll see on the slide the three major areas that we focus on, and our program falls under climate change and air quality. We run the First Nations Home Energy Save, and through our Energy Safe program, we work to support First Nations to transition towards energy efficient housing, and we strive towards that through peer learning and through local capacity building. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time today to go into the details of our program, but Tom's going to be putting in a link to our website in the Zoom chat. So if you want to learn a bit more about what we do, please visit our website, check it out, and you can reach out to us and ask any questions. And introducing this project today, Train the Trainer. So what we're hoping to do through this project is work with trainees, Indigenous trainees who have a background in the housing or construction sector, and to work through a training series where we can build skills and knowledge in energy efficient building construction. And this idea was really the creation of Richard Hall, who many of you on this call know. He had come to us with this incredible vision, and it's really his passion and drive that has helped make this happen. So I wanted to just open it up to Richard to introduce himself and if he wants to say a few words about his original idea for this project.
Good morning. Yeah, good morning, all. This started, I guess, in 2014, 2015. I was invited to BCIT to attend a seminar, and there were 70 people there, and I never saw any of our first people there. I said, oh, so I asked the question, why? And they said, well, we've been having challenges getting hold of people. So I said, okay, I'll do that for you. So I started to work, contacted Fraser Basin Council, and picked up some of my old inspection buddies and some newbies that were interested in the field. Started to work. But to create energy efficient homes that are affordable, where homeowner can make a decision that today I can feed my family instead of paying my huge hydro bills. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I want you to be open-minded, ask the questions, participate, and enjoy. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks Richard. And here I wanted to share a quick overview of what's coming up in our training series. So this is the first House as a System. And then our next one, Introduction to Zero Energy Buildings, that's going to be facilitated by BCIT. The third, Resilient and Affordable Building Design, will have a group of instructors supporting on that, including Richard Hall. And the last one, Building Condition Assessments, is going to be taught by the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, or AHMA. So that will be the virtual online training. And we're also planning to have some in-person training at the BCIT lab in Vancouver. The date's still to be confirmed, but we're hoping sometime in late fall. And at that training, you'll be able to complete the construction of a pre-framed miniature house and then test your construction for air tightness. And next up. So I wanted to extend a really big thank you to all of our project partners. First of all, to AHMA. They have been really supportive throughout our project planning, have done a lot of help with trainee recruitment, with planning out the training content, and they're going to be one of our lead instructors. So I think shout out to Sarah and Patrick, who are on this call right now. And then we also have BCIT, who has also helped us a lot with our training content and will be another lead instructor for us. And one of those instructor, Cody, is on this call right now. So thanks for joining us, Cody. And then below you'll see all of our funding partners. It's been amazing to see all the organizations who have jumped in to contribute to this project, including BC Hydro, Fortis BC, the province of British Columbia, BC Housing, the Real Estate Foundation, and AHMA has contributed as well. So a big thank you for all the support that we've received.
But yeah, I want to introduce our lead trainer for today. Adam is from the Sustainable Projects Group and is a certified engineer, technologist, and has lots of experience working particularly with Indigenous communities and providing energy assessments, supporting energy retrofits, and particularly working closely with energy managers. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, hand over the reins to Adam. And what I will say just before we go into the session is we have kind of captured areas where we have opportunities to ask questions and answers. However, if throughout when Adam is speaking, you've got any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box. And when the Q&A comes up, I can kind of start to ask those to Adam as a priority. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Adam and we can go from there.
Excuse me for a sec there. There's a couple of you missed, I think Bud Mack from Bella Coola and Christophe Vance from Cowichan Tribes.
Okay, let me just bear with me. If any of those folks would like to introduce themselves before Adam goes in, that would be great. Sorry, I missed you. You must have come on later onto the list.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Richard for inviting me to this today, and it's great to see this happening. Energy efficiency and sustainability is something that's greatly needed for everyone, and so I'm really glad to see everybody today.
Thank you very much.
Bud? Smokes, unmute yourself.
Are we good to go, Tom?
I think we're just waiting for one more person to just introduce themselves quickly. Just think they're just having a problem unmuting themselves.
Unmute yourselves, click on that red microphone.
Hello, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, Buddy Mac, I'm from Duhawk Nation. Been working with Richard in the housing. I'm a carpenter and mason and did a lot of renovations over the years, so be good to learn a lot more about building science. Thank you.
Thanks very much,
Awesome.
buddy. The floor is yours, Adam, so take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining today. I'd like to begin my side of the presentation by respectfully acknowledging that I am located on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for Indigenous people, including Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, language, and cultures continue to influence this area. I'm located in what's called Edmonton, so I'm coming from a little bit of a different location than most of you, and that'll sort of be part of the backbone of the presentation, is really learning about trying to really contextualize the way you look at the housing in your community and make sure that you are building homes and repairing homes in a way that addresses problems that are unique to your community. Because we all have, we live in different places, which means we're dealing with different elements. So that will be one of the key focuses of today. Yeah, so I guess at a high level, it's great to see everyone and see all the experience we have. So this is an introductory course to House as a System. So seeing and hearing all the experience that we have in the room, I'd just like to open it up and say, while I'm going through these building components, if you all have, many of you have more experience than I do with some of these things. So feel free to weigh in, share your experience with these. It doesn't have to wait to the end. If I'm talking about windows and you have some input to that, feel free to just weigh in and make this as interactive as you'd like. So don't feel bad about hopping in and sharing or asking a question. So I guess jumping in. Okay. So we're going to start today off with the building envelope. So we will go through the entire home as a system from top to bottom and inside and out, but we will be starting with the building envelope. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this term, but the term building envelope, most simply put, is the separator of the interior of a building and the exterior of a building. So one of the most key elements to the performance of a building, it's preventing things like snow, water, ice, humidity, temperature, and so on from coming into your home or from escaping your home in the case of temperature on a cold winter day. Because it does interact so closely with other elements of the home, it is probably the area we're going to spend the most time on. And on that, it sounds like in the group, there's lots of people who have experience, like with lots of red seal carpenters and whatnot. So if you've got stories about insulation or framing techniques or wall assemblies, please feel free to weigh in, because I'm coming from a lens here in Alberta for the most part, have worked in British Columbia a significant amount, but I haven't seen every type of wall assembly out there, and some of you maybe have. So like I said, feel free to weigh in. Okay, before we go into the individual components of a building envelope, I did just want to share this graphic of the climate zones in BC. As you can see here, BC is divided into 6 climate zones, and each climate requires that the homes are going to have different needs. So, for example, if you look at the map here, like up towards Smith River, that zone has completely different requirements for R value, which is a term utilized to describe the insulating value of a home, which higher is better. So, or not higher is more insulated, sorry, I shouldn't say better, but these homes in Smith River require significantly more insulation than homes down towards Vancouver and Victoria, based on just the climate itself. We're dealing with a very frigid winter, intense snow loads. So the focus of the building envelope is more focused on that. Whereas, you know, down south in southwest BC, you've got dealing with high humidity, lots of rain, a little bit more mild temperatures. So you have a completely different approach to building your building envelope and completely different priorities, because you're dealing with way different problems. So that's just sort of an umbrella to the whole thing, is that there is really no perfect building or perfect home that you can move from one location to another. So if you hear one person talking about, oh, you need a rain screen assembly wall, well, unless they're your neighbor or live in a very similar climate, that information might not necessarily be relevant. So just important to always keep the information that we get and try and contextualize it to where we're living. So that's pretty much good there, I think. In terms of the components of a building envelope, you know, you could go into more granularity probably than this, but most simply put, it's the foundation, the walls, the roof, windows, including, you know, skylights and windows in your doors, and then penetration such as venting, meters, you know, electrical. Excuse me. So as you can see by the diagram, this is, and this is sort of a general statement here, but you're losing about 35% of the heat from your walls, 25% from your ceiling and roof, about 15% from your foundation, 15% through your front door and back door, and then 10% through your windows. So it gives you an idea of the areas to focus on when you are building a home or when you're renovating a home, and the areas that can provide value. Like we'll get more into it later, but you know, one area would be in the attics and ceilings. A lot easier to add insulation to those areas. Obviously, you have to make sure that you know there's the structural support to do so, but you know, it's a much simpler way to insulate a home than through adding it to the walls for the most part. So it might not have as large of an impact, but you can see that it is still a pretty cost-effective way to add insulation to your home. So yeah, that's more of just an introduction to where we're losing the most heat in the building envelope. So, and this is, you know, this is simply put, but for the most part, envelopes fail for one of or a combination of four reasons. So the first would be design deficiencies. So like I was saying, if you design the wrong type of wall assembly for your climate, that's going to be a really quick way to see failure. So in Edmonton, if I don't put enough insulation, if my wall is not designed with enough insulation, my envelope is going to just not be adequate, so it will fail. Material failure. So, you know, you can get failing material. You can get shingles that, you know, shouldn't have made their way off the line. You can get poor cladding. So there is, or, you know, more often you'll see material failure with windows and whatnot. So that's a possibility. Poor workmanship. So things not being installed properly. You know, you can buy the nicest window in the world, but if you don't install it properly, flush, and you know, make sure that it's, you know, you don't, if you just slap it in and don't make, and you make sure it's, the gaps aren't sealed and that's not a flush install, that window will basically, it will operate just like a poor window. And then acts of nature. So we've all seen them. Sometimes they're unavoidable. We do want to design our homes in a way to be resilient against acts of nature as much as possible, especially the ones in our community. So, you know, some areas are going to be more prone to forest fires, so you're going to want fire retention potentially, whereas some, as you can see in this picture, may be prone to flooding. So maybe not a great place to build basements. And so there's often several of these are at play when a building is failing. So for example, an act of nature with material failure is a recipe for disaster. Same with poor workmanship. If you have a flood coming through and poorly installed windows into your basement, that's a pretty quick way to see some damage to your home. So just a high level thing to keep in mind, that these are typically how envelopes end up failing. Okay, getting into the individual pieces of the individual components of a home. So starting at the bottom of the building is a foundation. The foundation is the load bearing part of the building, which is either below or sitting on the ground level. There are three major types of foundation found in residential homes. There's basement, slab on grade, and crawl space. Each has its pros and cons. So I'll briefly touch on each of them and what they are and what some of their features are. So with the basement foundation, I don't think I need to really go into what that is, but you know, obviously an underground place to live and play, 6 to 10 deep, depending on soil conditions, typically provides both the most load bearing. Excuse me, I'm getting, just want to make sure that I'm, okay, yeah. So, and yeah, as Pat said, some houses can have all three types of foundations. And, you know, so basement is, has some positives, some negatives. It does expose you to certain elements and it does require you to properly build a home out to more square footage, essentially. It does provide cheap square footage to your home if you're thinking of if you're thinking as a community of ways to add square footage. It is a possibility to look at that. It is a cheaper way to add space technically. It is a nice seasonal living space, easy access for repairs, there's some storm protection, and there's, like I said, higher risk of flooding. Crawl space, that's typically raises the home 1 to 3 feet off the ground, enough space to crawl beneath, but not stand, hence the name. This is a preferred method in some moist climates as the home is elevated away from wet ground. There can be accessible utility space under the crawl space for piping, ductwork, wiring, and so on. It is very prone to moisture in the crawl space, so it is something to keep in mind and to try and monitor. And it does receive little protection from storms. And then finally, slab foundation. Slab, it's basically a slab of concrete that sits on the final grade of the property, typically a few inches thick, can be more if necessary, and it's reinforced with steel rods. It's the simplest and cheapest to manufacture for the most part. Durable, level surface floors, and can be a little less stable in extreme weather. So overall point here is good foundation is critical in keeping moisture away from the home and out of, most particularly the basement. Basements are the ones that deal with moisture from like soil for the most part out of these. There are some ways to increase the insulation of a home through the basement. So you can, or through the foundation. So you can do approaches. If you are building out a home with a basement, it's worth considering insulation approaches like gravel topped with rigid foam to keep the basement floors warm and dry. And depending on your soil conditions, just taking a look at ways to potentially ensure that that basement is insulated, because it's very hard to do so after the fact. A little sip of water. Okay, so in terms of foundation failures and fixes, I'll just breeze through this. Typical failures we find: flooding, mold, housing collapse in the worst scenarios, cold basement floors, and air leakage. So those are some of the most common failures with various degrees of severity. And simply put, there are some fixes that we can consider in our housing group. So adding gutter extensions, flooding gaps, restoring crown, reshaping landscaping. So that's a pretty simple one. Or just like often you'll see people having their eaves troughs towards the ground, and then the ground is really close to a window or their foundation. So just trying to avoid those little things to make sure that, as your house is filtering out rain, it's going away from the home and then maybe going down in a down slope. So gravity will work its way away from the home, as long as your neighbors aren't too close to you, obviously. And then, installing curtain drains, pumping water away from areas, and then installing waterproof walls are some simple fixes. And then I just wanted to show some pictures of some failing foundations. So this could be caused by poor drainage, soil moisture around the home, a water leak. So the point here is, if you see something like this, you're going to really want to make an effort to identify the problem. It's impossible to say at any given time without more context what the problem is, but you can start, if you see moisture like this and you see like clearly if this isn't ideal, the first step is to seek out the problem. And then, there may be quick fixes that you can do as a housing manager, as a maintenance individual, but you may sometimes have to pay a professional. So just something to keep in mind here. That's just a little image. And then this is just, an installed, like an installer fixing a crack in the foundation with some hydraulic cement. So this is a simple fix to a leak in the foundation. It's not going to necessarily repair the building entirely, but you can make little patches like that and help out quite a bit and go a long way. So in terms of waterproofing basements and crawl spaces, this is just quick do's and don'ts. You're going to want to find the source of moisture. So that's a do. Fill cracks with foundation with hydraulic cement. That's not necessarily what you always want to do, but it is something you can do. Seal interior walls with high quality waterproof paint. If you're doing this, you have to make sure you don't do that over the existing paint. It does have to be reapplied. and ensure all heat troughs are pointed away from basement. Don't make wall repairs with standing water in the basement. That's a hazard and is a recipe for disaster. Don't forget to address window well. Bless you. Apply a sealer over painted walls, and don't forget to install interior drainage solutions in your basement if possible. And that's a good idea to do if you deal with flooding for your new homes and your building basements, to potentially invest in additional interior drainage solutions. Okay, so moving on to walls. Walls are a perfect example of a building system that really tends to vary from region to region. As I said, like I'm located in Edmonton, which is very cold and dry. So here our buildings prioritize our values, reducing thermal bridging, which is, you know, when you're essentially when you're built your walls or ceiling or what have you, the assembly of it allows heat and essentially heat transfer to go through certain areas. So insulate. So in a 2x4 assembly house, all those pieces of wood essentially are going to be thermal bridges. So we want to avoid we want our wall to have more continuity and less ways for heat to escape. That's the main focus here in Edmonton. And yeah, lessening that heat transfer. In coastal BC, I'm seeing that the assemblies are more focused on allowing moisture to be managed effectively. So having, you know, certain assemblies like a rain screen assembly, as I've mentioned, is a super, I guess, the more progressive new way of doing it that I've seen. And then, so yeah, it is a way of just making sure that we contextualize the wall assembly. So there are many ways to build a wall. Some examples: rain assembly, split insulation, exterior installation, double stud with service wall. There's countless, and people are constantly coming up with new ones, and old ways are getting sort of discontinued. So it's a continually evolving field where, because like I said, people used to think that there's one way to build a wall, and it's continued to evolve around different regions to make sure that they're focusing on the problems that are in front of them. So all of these do perform slightly different with respect to like cost, constructability, air tightness, maintenance, moisture durability, sustainability. That being said, a wall should be built with a series of layers. So each is intended to serve its different purpose. So you're going to have a water shedding surface, a water resistive barrier, an air barrier, a vapor retarder, and some thermal insulation at a bare minimum for the most part. So yeah, that is, I'm going to go into some more detailed examples here, but I just want to quickly make sure. Yes, proper ventilation will be coming up. So in terms of walls, some of the issues that we tend to see is insulation. So not enough or too many gaps. So there is such thing as too airtight of a building that will not allow enough fresh air in and can create moisture problems. So that being said, there's also moisture and mold problems, condensation, leaks and cladding, failed moisture barriers, no air barrier, thermal bridging, and air tightness problems. Some typical fixes on existing homes would be covering leaks with weatherproofing. You can, as I'm sure most of us know, but if you think about trying to re-insulate a wall, it can be quite an exercise trying to, re-insulate a wall without ripping up all your drywall. So there are ways to spot fill areas. So you can cut a small hole in between studs and spray cellulose foam into a cavity with a hose. So there are ways to do spot fills. There's also ways to add exterior insulation through insulated panels. You just want to make sure that does jive with the wall assembly that you have. There's caulking areas around doors, windows, and patching walls. So that's a really simple fix that isn't utilized enough, in my opinion, is just simple caulking around, whether it be windows, doors, areas and walls. And then finding the source of the mold. And you do, like with, you're always going to want to try and mitigate the mold as fast as possible. So you're going to want to find the source of the mold. Generally, you're going to want to scrape it off with, a mask and ventilation and gloves. You can spray the spot with vinegar or baking soda and water. That should kind of, and then you can allow you to rub it off or scrape it off and spray again. So that's a quick fix of making sure you're at least addressing the health hazard, and then you're going to want to actually address the source of the mold and make sure that mold isn't other areas around the home or hasn't spread. So I have a quick, this is kind of an interesting diagram, I think. So this shows the R value. So as I mentioned, the higher the R value is, the more insulation of each different type of wall assembly. So you can see that there's a huge difference in some of these wall assemblies in the actual R value, that the performance that they get. So important to weigh that when you're building new homes, because obviously for the most part, this deep stud insulated, that's going to be more expensive than the stud insulated. And that generally can just make people, a little bit concerned or turn away from it. But you've got to consider the fact that you're going to be paying for heating for the entire lifetime of that house. So if that does have a serious impact on reducing that heating bill, that's great for the environment. That's great for the homeowner. And then furthermore, it's going to create a more functional home. So you're going to have walls that don't, like we've all lived in homes that have drafty windows and drafty walls, and it's just not as comfortable as one that has a nice, a solid performing wall where you can hang out and watch TV or something, and you don't have to put a blanket on if you don't want. So this just shows sort of the performance of these walls. And then here's a second diagram here of a rain assembly wall. So you can see here that the goal is to keep the water away from the insulation. So you have two air barriers, one behind the cladding and one behind the sheathing in the insulation between the structural wall. You have the cladding ventilation / draining cavity framing system here acts as a key structural element, as well as it allows an area for the water to drain and for the air to flow without moisture getting stuck. So instead of trying to keep the moisture out, they actually say, come on in, moisture, we're going to let you in, and then we're going to divert you where we want you. So it's kind of like admitting that for the most part, we haven't been successful at just keeping moisture out. If we push it right up against the wall, it's very hard. It finds its way in. Rain and moisture are really tricky, and they're persistent, so they find their way. So the rain screen wall invites it in and allows a place for it to drain effectively, and then then you're dealing with just sort of making sure that air that's drained into a proper area, and you're for the most part going to steer clear of moisture if installed correctly. Once again, just another image here of some walls that have, clearly having some problems. So they ripped this wall out to add insulation, found a bunch of mold. So now you've got to, remediate that mold, as well as right here, you've clearly got some moisture problems or something to address. Okay, nice. So rain screen is also a fantastic pressure moderator. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, 10 minutes left in this section, so I'm going to quickly zip through this. So I've got to kind of cruise through the next couple slides to catch up to my timeline here. So won't go too much into this. If you guys, we will be sharing this. So these are some pros and cons generally for siding and cladding. As you can see, they all have their pros and cons. it's going to, once again, as always, I'll be a sort of a broken record saying this, it's going to depend on where you live, and depend what your budget is, and also depend on what your priorities are for the home. But for an energy efficient home, it's, you know, the cladding option is critical. There is some R values associated with wood. There's some insulated siding options. And then, as you can see, sort of the stone-like substances like stone, stucco, brick have very little insulating value themselves. So you'll have to make sure that you support them with solid insulation. Okay, getting into roofs. Different types of roof and roofing materials. So there is, for the most part, there's more than this, obviously, but for the most part, there is asphalt, metal, and wood roofs. Similar to siding, like there are plenty of different ways and methods, and based on sort of the actual structure of the home, it will depend on what the best technique is. Just because, you know, roofs are very variable, but it's important to consider that the main goal of the roof is to stand up to water, snow, wind, heat, cooling. So whatever element you face the most is one that you're going to want to look after, sort of, and focus on. I don't know if anyone's from a really snowy area, or if you've been to the mountains and you've seen the new way that they're designing homes to make sure that the snow loads are properly managed. But there are just techniques that are very specific, and I'm sure in areas that are incredibly rainy, there's new techniques to properly drain that. So considerations there: roof material, the roof pitch, the overhangs, and then the fenestrations and vents. So at a high level, asphalt shingles are the most common. They're easy to install. They do have a shorter lifespan. They don't provide much insulating value at all. But yeah, they're very standard and sort of a reliable. And they are easy to fix and patch. I have an asphalt roof that I was on the other day because I was having a leak. So I had to go up and fix it. So I'll get into that in a second. But metal roofing is resistant to extreme weather, durable, has high solar reflectance, long-lasting, lightweight, fire-resistant, and is expensive, noisy, and conducts heat. So it's not often the great solution for homes. And then, sorry, I just jumped ahead by accident there. And then wood shingles looks nice, flammable, not great in wet climates, doesn't last long. So in terms of roof pitch, when designing a home, should be high so it doesn't collect snow, but also designed to avoid shedding snow in front of doors in high traffic areas. And then roof overhangs, an important thing to consider. Roof overhangs can be very valuable in keeping out light during the summer when the sun is at its highest point. So designing an overhang in a way that, and this is something you'll see in more iterative design processes like the passive house and whatnot, but where the overhang is designed in a way to prevent the sun from coming into the house in the summer to avoid having to create a cooling load, but it's not at such an angle that the sun won't get in the winter where it's at a lower angle of incidence. So just a way to design your home in a way that's pretty energy efficient and allows for the benefits of the sun and not the negatives. In terms of roofing failures and fixes, I'll just breeze through this. We got roofing leaks, flashing blowouts, poor installation, lack of maintenance, ponding water on the roof, punctures in a roof, and then improper repairs. Fixes, you have proper maintenance on the roof. So that's a pretty key one that I think some people take for granted, but clearing off debris once a year, maybe twice a year, clearing gutters, examining for damage, because you'll probably see the damage before it actually finds its way to a ceiling. And then understanding your roof type so you can get the right material for a fix, self-adhering roof tape, extra shingles for repair, High quality duct tape is even good for quick and temporary repairs. Polyurethane caulk and sealant, and then roof seal patch to patch leaks. So that's what I was doing on my ceiling the other day, or on my roof, sorry, is I have a little solar tube that allows sun into one of my bathrooms that has no window, and it was leaking. So I had to go up and apply a bunch of this stuff around it, and it worked so far. So, but it hasn't rained yet, so I don't actually know if it's worked. But either way, this is what I was doing on my roof. It's not a great fix. I probably have to re-roof my roof next year, but it's going to do the job for a temporary fix, and it's going to prevent mold in my ceiling. So quickly going into windows. Main thing to consider here is the window quality, the quality of the installation, the condition of the window, the performance of the window, and the operation of the window. So those are the main things that influence window performance, I guess. So in terms of window quality, we've got single, double, triple, even quadruple pane. I saw one at a conference that had 10 levels or layers. So each of these layers does apply or does add insulating value to the home and will make your building more energy efficient for the most part. The best windows have for the most part, have an argon or krypton fill. There are some new techniques that are being used though. And then the quality of the frame and the seal is one of the most overlooked things, but it's really critical. So insulated framing and non-conductive framing, as you can see by this picture, there's more than just the glass in a window is sort of the take home here. And make sure that when you are negotiating window installs, or if you are commissioning them in your community, that you are making sure that it's going all the way, have a quality frame. You're going to have to, open it up, and sometimes it's not going to be flush. So you're going to have to do some additional carpentry work. So making sure that these are installed properly is really critical. Just another diagram to show the insulating value of these windows. So it does have a huge effect. The R value is almost quadrupled as you get to a quadruple glaze to a double glaze. So pretty impactful. And then the quality of the installation. Main thing you're going to want to consider is the window positioning, the size, how flush is it installed. So I've talked a little bit about that, but probably can't go into much detail. How well it's sealed, and then you can check all of this with a blower door test, which I will can get into a bit later, but on what that looks like. But that's part of the Energat assessment. In terms of windows, poor fit, warped frame, leaks in the center, leaks in the corner, winter frost, dirt and debris in the sill, loose and missing seals or gaskets, improper repairs, and often they're just past their lifetime or some of the failures. And then there are lots of fixes. So you can use curtains. You don't want to go too far with that because that can create some mold problems, but it can be a temporary way to keep out certain heating elements. Shutters, seal and caulk and weather stripping is a really quick and easy fix a lot of the time. Window film is cheap and actually quite good. So you can apply that to the inside or outside of your and it actually does provide some security if people break windows or whatever. There's window film helps with that, storm windows, and then cleaning sills and frames consistently. So this is just a picture of a window that you can see is having a few problems. And then last but not least, I do apologize. I'm gonna have to breeze through insulation here, just based on our timeline. But yeah, as you can see, there are some different types of insulation. As we move from left to right, you are typically going up in cost and in insulating value. That is a generalized statement because there are, some variables still, but, the main thing is adding insulation and ensuring air tightness in the building envelope helps maximize the performance of the wall assembly. So you can design a wall perfectly, but if you don't apply the insulation correctly or you don't have the right insulation, it's not going to perform the way it should. Adding insulation to walls after they're drywalled is very challenging and expensive. So to avoid these costs, you're going to want to ensure that the building is well insulated to at least R22. That's like the bare minimum, but for some regions way higher. So you're going to want to make sure you do that up front because that's not a cost that you can easily renegotiate in the future. Won't go into too much detail, but I think these slides are going to get shared. So these are just, once again, some where these different insulation types may be most applicable and what the materials are. So we've got bad insulation, foam, insulating concrete forms, loose fail and blow in, and spray foam and foamed in place. So once again, they all have their pros and cons and their cost implications. But for the most part, it is a worthy installation to spend money up front on insulation. The cost increase is very small relative to the impact on the overall performance of the home and the energy efficiency of the home. Another just simple picture here to just show sort of the typical areas where you'll see insulation laid throughout a home. So this was what I was dealing with when I was fixing my, when I was on my roof, it was right here. So it's all over the place. And sometimes you don't see insulated basements and things like that. So more insulation for the most part is going to provide cost value for you in the long run. Roof insulation, attic insulation should be R40 minimum, higher in most regions. This is an area that you can add to typically in a more cost-effective way than the walls, but I would still always suggest investing up front. And it doesn't really negatively affect with the building's function for the most part if you do that. So and then I guess this is last but not least, wall penetration. So this is sort of not a system in itself, but as you can see, there are things coming in and out of the building envelope all the time. So dryer vents, faucets, air conditioner, duct registers, all over the place. So these are often overlooked areas with respect to insulation and focus. So it's just something to consider that you are going to want to, if you design the home, and sometimes these things go in after the fact. So they always need to be, you need to address the leaks. You need to make sure they're sealed during installation. You'll sometimes see vents funneling cold air in and allowing moisture into the home. So you can caulk, seal air leaks where plumbing, ducting, or electrical wires come through the walls. Install foam gaskets behind outlets and switch plates on the walls. Cover your kitchen exhaust fan to stop air leaks when it's not in use. Install rain screens in damp areas, and then check your dryer vent to be sure it's not blocked. Okay, and then just to wrap up, this is just a diagram on the, just to finish up the regional thing. So this just shows the different requirements from region to region. So maybe just take a second here, find your zone, and then take a look at the requirements that you have for R value, and then compare that to what you see as the most opposite zone as you, or the furthest off zone. And you can just see how different the requirements are from region to region. So maybe you can just, we can all just do that, but I look at, zone 8 to zone 4, if suspended R value or suspended floor, the R value is double. So, someone saying, oh, all homes need to be R22, take it with a grain of salt, I guess. So, okay. on to the Q&A. Tom, do you have some questions here?
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam. Yeah, we just wanted to open up to you guys, really. You know, it might be that you have some questions for Adam, but also I think what would be really useful is maybe from some of the more experienced guys, if there's some examples that you can use. You know, we've seen here that there's a lot of battling with elements and there's a lot of adapting that needs to be done depending on the climate zone. So yeah, I open up the floor. You can feel free to kind of raise your hand and I can select you. I have a comment in the box, or if you prefer to just unmute yourself and ask Adam or any of the facilitators directly, then feel free to.
Yeah. Hello?
Hey there, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is Chad Paul, West Bank First Nation. Yeah, I mean, everything that, you know, you went through is, well, to me, it's pretty basic understanding. I've done this for over 30 years now. In the last 4 years, stepping up the builds on West Bank First Nation and increase our value. I think we all might, you know, some of us might remember the fiasco of the R2000 houses and how airtight they were. And they were having problems with moisture, especially up in the attics and stuff like that. No proper ventilation and moisture actually building up in the attics. And my, you know, marching forward into this, you know, my concern, but you know, is my question is, you know, how many communities will be able to start taking on a higher energy efficient house? I know building here in West Bank First Nation, we have the last one that we did, our Step 4 installation, which is 3-inch. We rigged it out in the outside and the foundation, and also 3-inch on the outside of the building with rain screen added onto the R24 walls, and then we stepped up the roof. The values of that were tremendous over the winter. We were able to heat our units using 110 heaters in the they were walk-ins, and we were able to put them in the lower part. One heater would heat up basically a little over 800 square feet. Yeah, you know, the results of it. But also the other thing is that when we start taking a look at getting air tightness and stuff like that, one of the problems that we had working with my site supervisor was constantly doing the quality control from the ground up, making sure that the builder that we were using understood the system because it was so new to them. They never built a house under the Step 4 code. And, you know, that was a challenge. So I think, you know, marching forward, our communities and builders in the communities, whoever's going to be watching and supervising, you know, will have to become really in tune with all the requirements, especially in the Step 4. You know, we did our blower door tests. We did window tests for water penetration, 5 minutes of full water pressure on the windows. And, you know, so I think, yeah, I think we're going to have some problems with maybe some communities incorporating this, especially now that lumber prices have quadrupled. Now you add on to that extra insulation, shipping costs, the supply chain is down alone. You know, I'm interested in going forward, but, you know, I'm also very attached to reality as far as how much buildings cost, and that most communities can barely afford to get the buildings under conventional techniques as it is.
Thank you, Chad. Yeah, some kind of great questions. I know you cut out a little bit there, but I think, yeah, I think the main kind of framing was just really accessibility of reaching these energy efficient building standards and the time and, yeah, that an effort that's kind of put put into it as well, particularly kind of working with builders to understand and adapt to those changing in standards, as well as the increasing prices of materials like lumber as well.
Yeah, even just the supply chain alone has increased, probably for us at least double, if not triple.
Mm-hmm. We also have a question from Joseph in the chat box, which I'll say out loud. Rich is wondering how First Nations homes will be retrofitted with an air exchange system if steps are taken to make them more airtight in the coming years. He goes on to say he's assuming more funding will be dedicated to renovations and to new homes. So if anyone would be able to answer that would be great.
I can answer that. I think I sit on the Aboriginal Capital Committee Board of BC, and there's plans to up the renovation dollars to 60K. That's where we are sitting right now, when part of the board said keep it there because of the energy upgrades. So the other query that from that phone number 250-863, I think how do we keep it affordable? I think part of the challenges is to create a building standard, a booklet, and create an application. It's critical that the applications kind of complement the like insulation, which way is the house facing, and how you put the selection of material and how you place it, and the type of windows. For us, we standardized the window openings. Don't know what the costs are, because and even the material and design systems that work for you, like heating systems that are consistent. And that's how we make it affordable. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. We have two hands up here as well, so I'll go to Chris first, who I believe has a question.
Yes, just a statement somebody else mentioned in the comments sections about ventilation in the attics from the soffits. That was a concern. If there's an upgrade in the attic and there's just low heel trusses in the system, it becomes a challenge to upgrade the insulation in those areas and having a proper ventilation from the soffits to the attic space, because I've seen that problem all the time. Like a house is required to have 4 square feet of attic ventilation. Doesn't mean you have 4 square feet on top of the roof. You need that 25% minimum from the soffits, or else the moisture will just sit in the attic, and then have temperature problems in the attic space with the moisture, and then that's how we have a lot of failure in our Duroid roofing gets cooked. So that's something that has to be in the assessments, as the capability of the upgrade from the assessment of the attic and how we're going to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And yeah, I certainly think that's something that we'll explore a little bit later in some of the other sessions, particularly the second session with BCIT. I'll go over to Leo Herbert, who has his hand up as well.
Hi, it's Hebert actually, but that's okay. Just a couple of points I wanted to make. Over the years that I've been involved with right way back to the renovations RAP program and CHIRP and CHIP and, you know, one of the challenges that you have, of course, is funding, yeah, which has been mentioned. But, you know, with, as we all know, with the house as a system, for every action, there's a reaction. So if we tighten up the house and we add more insulation, well, it's going to create another problem somewhere else. And you have to, over the years, we've been had to do things piecemeal because of the lack of funds for one, right? So if we're adding insulation, well, we should be doing ventilation and doing everything together. So we had a challenge of trying to renovate and then retrofit at the same time, or try to balance those two. So I think I came up with a word. I don't think I've ever seen it anywhere. And we've been doing that in some of the communities I work with, and it's called we retrovate. So the other thing too that we have to be cognizant of too is that there is radon gas. So if we tighten up the house, we're increasing the levels of radon gas. We got to make sure. So it's before you do something, you have to step back and do something before you can do that. And we had to do that before we started renovating homes, was to check for some of these other things. So with house as a system, for every action, there's a reaction. So just have to be cognizant of that.
Thank you, Leon. Yeah, I love that. I love that word retrobate as well. It really fits into the picture there. Finally, I think we'll go with Cody, who has his hand up, and then after that, we'll kind of go into the breakout sessions, being mindful of time here. Floor's yours, Cody.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to add to some of the comments. I love the conversations that are happening, and yes, we absolutely need to think about the home holistically and look at all aspects. When we're addressing cost, you really need to establish process, train everybody on the site to be equally an important role, because everything that we're moving towards is extremely fluid state. We have an opportunity to try non-prescriptive methods, but if you don't get all the stakeholders to sit down on the table at once, review like an integrated design process, and talk about your concerns and how you're going to address this, you're going to have some difficulties. In my own process doing passive homes and high performance builds in the last 5 years, the first one we did, everything happened 2 or 3 times. Morale on site was really low, but once we finally got our target, it was a huge moment of camaraderie amongst all the trades, all the stakeholders, the designers, the homeowners. And the second build we went we hit numbers extremely low, below passive levels first one out of the gate. Second comment would be on the attics. I would love to see in the world of high performance that we start thinking of our air barriers being external, going all the way over our roofs, and have conditioned attic spaces, which could be a trade-off in more square footage. We have a couple things that we'll show in the lab here on how we've executed that that I think you'll find very interesting. And yeah, the last comments there on the retrograde, I think that's exactly a perfect word for it. We have old buildings that are still important commodities that we need to look at, and through the evolution of building, we'll be able to peel back the layers and find out what works for those buildings. But evolving your process and training everybody on site, including the youngest or newest person, is going to be valuable for success. But I really love all the comments being made and all the contributions. So thank you.
All right, it's now 10:47, so if folks are trickling back from the break, I think we'll get ready to jump into the next section. Adam, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right, perfect.
Good. Okay. Hope I'm going to just have one last refreshment before I talk for half an hour.
Definitely.
Okay, so quickly, I've seen a few chats come in, make sure we're all okay. We have 20. Okay, great. So got about 20 to 25 minutes here to cover ventilation and heating technologies. So I will try and keep it pretty brief just because we've got a few slides, and then we can have some really nice discussion after the fact, I think, in the breakout rooms about more specifics. So starting off with exhaust fans, very simple form of ventilation. So most homes have exhaust fans in their bathrooms, maybe their kitchen hoods and their dryer exhaust. There can be lots of problems that arise from the use of exhaust fans as well as benefits. So common problems are that the fan's too small, undersized. It doesn't actually provide enough pump to it. So the fan isn't used properly or enough. So a lot of people they only turn on their fan, for example, when they're showering, and they don't keep it on before and after, which is really some of the most important times to use it. And then also fans not being ducted properly. So being ducted into the ceiling and not out of the house is another problem that you can see with exhaust fans. The main item to look out here is that it's critical that homeowners know how to operate these effectively, and that they should be exhausted and ducted out of the building. So as well as that the CFM of the fans is enough. So the cubic, so either way, I've found that obviously, I think for the most part, people know how to use a fan in this room. And if not, you'll learn it and then you'll start doing it properly. I'm still guilty of sometimes turning off the fan by accident, and I do it for a living. So I'm not saying any of us are perfect for it, but what I think is impactful is to do, and maybe it can be part of your plan after the fact, is running some simple information sessions with homeowners, or going through and making sure that people understand how to operate their homes effectively. That comes in a lot with ventilation. Ventilation is a lot in the hands of the homeowner and the user of the home. So exhaust fan, and then some of the other things that we might learn today, or that you already know, but that you see that homeowners don't know. A lot of it is just about passing on that knowledge, because as housing managers and operators and maintenance people, we only have so much power. So teaching the individual is going to be critical in this section. So air intake, ventilation is pretty tricky, and it interacts a lot with the other parts of the building. So at this point, I've already told you how important it is to seal off your building from the elements. And now we're going to talk about how to let air into the building effectively. So it's kind of counterintuitive in that way. But as we've sort of hit on now a few points, like the building is a system, and like Igloo, the company, they designed a building envelope that was so airtight that you could heat it with a Bic lighter, but that home wouldn't have proper ventilation and wouldn't be safe to live in based on that. So, there are several ways that a building can allow air in, and a certain amount of air must be let into a building in order to have a healthy environment. So that's just an important thing to consider with air intake. And air can get into your building through envelope infiltration, through open doors and windows, a central heating system that actually intentionally draws in fresh air, a heat recovery ventilator system, or a makeup air system, and a few other means too, and other system types. So heat recovery ventilation. So heat recovery ventilators, also sometimes called ERVs or HRVs, are becoming pretty popular. The device is simply a supply air fan and an exhaust fan in a box, where two air streams can transfer heat between each other. So essentially, the fresh outdoor air is preheated by the exhaust air, and I'll go more into it. I have a chart next slide, but they are great systems for energy efficient fresh air, and it utilizes some stale warm air and cool fresh air, and basically converts them into cold stale air that you send outside, and keeps warm fresh air that you keep inside. So it takes the good and sends out the bad, essentially. It requires ducting, generally in the walls, so that can be costly. It can be integrated with bathroom fans and exhaust fans sometimes. They are not cheap to retrofit into an older home, and it does require attentiveness to the elements, so some freeze frost protection, and depending where you are, you're going to want to make sure that you properly ensure that the home is equipped for it and that the climate is equipped for it. And certain climates, like I said, will require additional protections. It's important to install with controls to increase or decrease fan speed and adjust the amount of mixing. Like in the summer, you may not want heat recovery. So there are some settings that you can play with, and to have an understanding of how to operate that effectively is going to be critical for the overall performance. There are some noise issues with fans and grills, so some people will complain about it. And then there is, it can be, there are just some problems, and then people will request from sort of those exterior problems. They may not like it as much as just your standard system. So here's how simply an HRV really works. So like I said, you have the warm, stale air. So say, from your kitchen or your bathroom. So the heat is, you want to keep the heat, but you want to lose the stale. So then you've got fresh, cold air coming from the outside, and it's drawn in. And then essentially you dispel the stale, cool air, and you keep the fresh, heated air. So it's a pretty cool system. This is how it looks installed, a pretty clean install here. And yeah, they're pretty solid systems in certain climates. And just another simple little display of how an HRVs works. And this is more like practically where it might be located, and then sort of how it is actually ventilating your building, and where it would be dispelling out certain air, and then where it would be drawing in fresh air. So there are different housing types and different ways that you can configure this, but this is a pretty neat diagram just showing, here's the washroom, kitchen, pick up that air, and then let's deliver fresh air to the other rooms. So air cleaners and air purifiers can also be installed to improve indoor air quality. They do this by sucking air past a filter, which captures major pollutants. And there aren't a ton of major downsides that I'm aware of. Some people may have some other opinions on that, other than just the cost of installing them and purchasing them. So you can get mechanical or electrical air filters, and they can be installed in a forced air furnace, heat pump air intake, induct or portable versions. And they remove air particles in the air. So like a HEPA filter would be an example. So yeah, and then there's different types and different levels of filter. So an activated carbon filter removes gaseous pollutants. Apparently you should avoid ozone air cleaners because they can cause O3 related air quality issues, and they need to be sized to the home and to the area of the home effectively. So they're also quite good if you have a home or a climate that's prone to dust and odor and particulate circulation. So I know some people probably deal with that more than others. And then here are just some pictures. You've got some plug-in air purifiers there, and then you've got just a furnace filter here. So just on the furnace filter, if you do have a furnace or anything that has a filter, even your car, it is important to clean it out just for the general health and performance of the system. I know we could all do a bit better of a job of that, myself included. Setting, reminders to make sure you stay on this is something that I've done. I just put it in my calendar to say, go check the furnace filter. I have a removable one, so I have to vacuum it and clean it and wipe it down. So, but some people have these replaceable ones. So just grabbing 10 from a hardware store, having them ready, makes it easy. So, and then if you're a housing manager or in charge of a large housing stock, it may be worth considering buying some in bulk. And if you're finding that people don't do it properly or don't maintain their systems properly, either getting hands-on and doing it yourself, or potentially, like I said before, trying to run some sort of educational campaign that helps people understand the benefits to properly managing the ventilation aspects of their home. On to dehumidifiers. Pretty simple here. Dehumidifiers are for areas that have too much humidity and take the moisture out of the air and produce air better suited for the indoor environment. They go in areas where the moisture cannot escape or has a harder time escaping, such as a basement, bathroom, or crawl space. They are typically for warm and moist climates. For example, I don't think I've seen too many dehumidifiers in houses like mine. Most people have humidifiers. So in certain climates, it's unnecessary. They are generally kind of band-aids for other home system issues, whether that be about bad performing foundation or envelope or poor ventilation. But like I said, it is a band-aid, so it does have some value. This will address humidity issues by reducing the humidity. So some climates, you may have an opposite problem, like I said, and you may want to add moisture, in which you'd go for the humidifier rather than the dehumidifier. And just to keep in mind, some of those goals for humidity levels is about 50% in the summer and 30% in the winter. And that will make sure that you have a healthy environment for the most part that doesn't produce mold. And yeah, depending where you live in the country or the province, you know, you may be in the market for a dehumidifier or humidifier, and humidifiers are, you can get them both aftermarket or kind of integrated into the system. So it may be a good idea if you have persistent damp issues that can't otherwise be addressed to look at a dehumidifier. But yeah, for the most part, you do want to look at the more fundamental issues in the home. But as we've kind of talked about, there's the ideal and then there's the reality, and sometimes we're constrained by budget, capacity, workload, whatever it is. So sometimes the Band-Aid is going to get you through to next year, and it may not be the best way to do it, but if that's all you have, it's all you have. So obviously we want to design homes to not require a dehumidifier, but sometimes they're valuable. Just another quick diagram of the functionality of the system. So humidifier, you just fill up with water, and then, you know, essentially the water passes through a vaporizer, some heating coils, and then it produces water and steam, and just like literally adds steam to your home. Dehumidifier takes moist air, runs it through a condenser, dispels the water, and produces dry air. Okay, some moisture and maintenance best practices. So pretty long list here, but obviously you're going to want to check for damp spots and do your best to fix leaks. That's pretty critical. Air sealing your home, it's a good start. Using kitchen fans when cooking. You run bathroom fans when showering and bathing, and I would add before and after. So activating the fan is a good idea, you know, get the flow going. So then when you actually start having steam, it's going. You know how fans take some time to start up, and then leaving it. So when, you know, you take that steamy shower and you come out, you don't just turn it off. So that's a key one. Ensure your clothes, dryer, stove, kitchen, and bathroom fans are vented outside. Caulk around tubs and sinks. Avoid basement clutter. Open windows. That's obviously weather permitting. You don't want to be that person who has their windows open all winter and then wonders why their heating bill is so expensive. Using a dehumidifier or AC unit when required. Yeah, cleaning and disinfecting things that hold water. use mold resistant paint in moist indoor areas, and exterior paints that allow moisture to pass through effectively. And use timers or sensors to control bathroom and exhaust fans. So that's a good idea too, to save electricity in case you're going to take your shower, then you're going to leave to work. That's a good way to make sure it doesn't stay on all day either. And don't dry wood indoors. I know some people have wood heating systems, which we will go into. And leave your furnace fan on, add fresh air duct with variable damper to your heating system, HRVs, and then replacing old windows are all items that you can consider. They're going to depend on where your moisture problems are coming from, though. So. Okay, so indoor air quality is typically measured in parts per million, which is a measure of the density or the amount of contaminants in the air. The amount that would be considered dangerous is dependent on the contaminant. So an example of poor air quality is the association of headaches and poor air quality. So people who experience poor air quality are more prone to receiving headaches. And that's because of the parts per million within the air that they're experiencing. So human headaches and drowsiness are often reported when exposed to 2,000 parts per million of CO2 for more than 5 minutes. And outdoor air is typically around 450 parts per million. So it gives you an idea of how important it is to make sure that you are getting that fresh air in there, because CO2 will build up, and it will cause, even at a bare minimum, it can create larger problems, but at a bare minimum, you'll just feel worse. You'll feel tired, groggy, and have a headache. So major concerns with indoor air quality are of course, biological contaminants, so mold, insects, mites, cockroaches, dust, pollen, combustion byproducts, so gas and small particles caused by the incomplete burning of fuels such as oil, gas, kerosene, wood, coal, and propane, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and then formaldehyde and other volatile organic compounds, which are found in materials such as plywood and particle board, in furnishings, drapes, carpets, and so on. And then asbestos. So insulator and fire retarder are found in older homes. I'm sure we've all come across it. Only an air quality issue if disturbed or crumbling, and is typically found in homes before 1990. So always good to get an idea, of which homes have asbestos, and that should influence what you're going to do there, because if you can't afford to mitigate it, don't disturb it, because that's going to cause some serious problems. And then radon, which is naturally occurring radioactive gas found throughout BC. So some things that are concerns with indoor air quality. Fresh versus recirculated air, just something to keep in mind. Any given home, the ventilation system is pushing around both fresh air and recirculated air. And most ventilation data and standards, you may hear me say CFM, which is cubic feet per minute. So you'll also hear air changes per hour, which is a metric used to describe 50% of the air replaced in a building or a room with fresh air. So generally in BC, I believe 3 to 6 air change per hour is recommended. So that's something that the home should be designed to have. And just something to note, I guess, like large commercial buildings require ventilation by code, and typically recirculate about 80% of the air and then have 20% fresh air. In residential homes, ventilation is not strictly required by code except for in certain cases. And then getting fresh air is very important for their dense population where CO2 can build up in the space. So not as critical in homes, but an example would be like a big theater or say a university classroom, those areas, you know, where you slam a couple hundred people into a room, if there's not proper ventilation in those rooms, it can become actually quite dangerous quite quickly, and it can affect people negatively. So, oh, excuse me, sorry, I scrolled by accident there. So centralized ventilation, as you can see here, there is you know, an example of an exhaust ventilation. So exhaust ventilation systems are most appropriate in very cold climates. In climates with warm, humid summers, depressurization can draw moist air into a building wall cavities where it may condense and cause moisture damage. So this may not work in necessarily all climates, and there are different types of ventilation systems based on your climate. So another point of just, ventilation system, it's going to vary from climate to climate. So exhaust ventilation systems are relatively simple and inexpensive to install. They typically an exhaust ventilation system has a single fan connected to a centrally located single exhaust point in the house. And a better design is to connect the fans to the ducts from several rooms, preferably rooms where pollutants are generated, such as bathrooms. So adjustable passive vents, adjustable passive vents through the windows or walls can be installed in other rooms to introduce fresh air rather than relying on leaks in the building envelope. So you can just install those passive vents, and passive vents may, however, require large pressure differences than those introduced by ventilation fan to work properly. So our concern here with the exhaust ventilation system is that along with fresh air, they may draw in pollutants, including radon, mold, dust, fumes from a garage, and flue gases from a fireplace. So it's not a perfect system, and it does have plenty of concerns that you keep up with. So there are many different ventilation systems. The point of this was just to show there is a lot of thought that goes into them, and there is it's not just as simple as, you know, opening windows, and like there's pressure to consider, exhaust fans, and it has to interact with your building envelope effectively. Okay, another item we have to manage is similar to air quality is moisture. There are two sources for the most part. It's like water vapor and airborne moisture, and then leaks and spills. We're going to want to keep humidity under 60% to ensure there's no mold growth, and too much moisture leads to mold, mildew, which can increase allergies and lung problems. And it can, you know, create nasty stains on your windowsills, walls. It can cause the interior paint to blister and peel. It's just all together bad for business to have mold running through your home. And condensation can also lead to rot, structural decay. Mold can, so altogether, just keep in mind these numbers. I would make a habit of trying to monitor them in homes, because it is going to be a really good indicator if it's a fertile breeding ground for mold, we'll say.
Adam, I'm just going to have to ask you to maybe go through the heating section in a couple of minutes, if that's okay. Just being mindful of time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we did talk on this, attic and crawl space ventilation. So this is key to prevent moisture. Won't go too much into this, but there are ways to actively and passively vent ventilation, or your attic ventilation. So as we talked about earlier, we add insulation, and you do have to make sure that this area is ventilated. And here's just a quick diagram of a functioning attic versus a dysfunctioning attic. So you can see that there's different levels of insulation. In the dysfunctional attic, you're seeing you know, lots of moisture, condensation from the roof, and whatnot. So these will be shared, but good little diagram. So heating systems, as Tom mentioned, I'm a little behind time here. So these are generally the heating fuels. So fossil fuels, renewable energy, and heat exchange. So fossil fuels, natural resources, you burn gas, you generally burning things to create power. Renewables, you're utilizing technology to harness nature, so wind, solar, water, things like that. And then obviously you've got heat exchange, which uses electricity to move heat around, but doesn't actually create the heat. So geo-exchange, solar thermal, geothermal, air source heat pumps. Main thing to just consider here is the availability of these resources, the cost of them, the reliability. So for the most part, they are all reliable if designed properly and sized properly, and the air quality and GHG emissions associated with them. So as we all know, like, renewables are clean, more environmentally friendly, but there are some cost concerns with them, some reliability concerns with relying purely on them, whereas there's some environmental concerns with fossil fuels, and as well, there's some concerns with fossil fuels in some remote locations in terms of access. So shipping in fuel oil, diesel, propane, those are all problems that we do encounter. So moving on, heating system. So central heating systems, basically include, so they utilize a single heating system to heat the entire home. So examples of this are central furnaces, boilers, and heat pumps. Direct heat examples, so those are more spot power. That would be gas-fired space heaters, unvented gas fired heaters, electric space heaters, and wood burning pellets and pellet stoves and fireplaces. For central heating, this is essentially just showing some different types here. Effectively, you've got warm air furnace, hot water boiler, and heat pumps. So warm air furnaces, I think we for the most part know how they operate. So they typically, a fan works in combination with the furnace to blow warm air through the airs and grills of the house. I won't go into, just for time's sake, I do have some more notes as to how it actually operates, but I don't think it provides a ton of value right now. And then hot water boiler, boilers used to heat hot water that is sent to the terminal units. So in-floor radiators or baseboard radiators that then dispel heat. And then heat pump works the same way as a furnace, except a heat pump is doing the heating instead of the furnace. And it also typically provides cooling. We'll just continue on here. Direct heating. Direct heating. Here are some examples. You've got the electric baseboard, which turn electricity into heat via the resistance of an element in them. Ductless heat pumps work similar to the electric baseboard, except there isn't a terminal heat pump moving the heat in or out, and can also provide cooling. Wood burning pellet stoves, I think it's pretty self-explanatory there. And then fireplaces, similar, and gas-fired space heaters, a little more uncommon, a space heater that burns propane or natural gas for heat. So I haven't encountered a ton of them, but they are out there. So Richard, I think we wanted to maybe pick your brain here about some of the concerns around wood heating, if that was possible.
Yeah, a lot of information. Yeah, good information. And my experience as wood burning appliances is not good, simply because the temperature is too erratic for internal purposes, and the minus is I noticed that it causes a lot of fires to homes, so a lot of damages to the home that affects the indoor air quality of a person. And I find that the habits of our human beings, that they store the wood, the wood inside the homes, causes a lot of moisture damages. It kind of wicks up into the home, and a lot of it creates a lot of carbon monoxide flow that people get affected by, but they don't know really that they're getting affected by it. So for us, we minimize the use of that, and we designed a heating system with a forced air system and a heat pump, which we find most suitable for our region. The other thing about wood burning appliances installation is if it's not done properly, it causes more damages of the off-gassing of creosote, and the placement, which is too close to combustible, will cause a happening called pyrolysis, which is internal combustion of wood, which will start fires. But the hardest work that we're going to do is, as energy advisors, is change the perception of this wood burning appliance to something more suitable for first people and people in general, because it's good to have as a temporary source, but not as a consistent source of heat, because it's not consistent. I think with a community we had in 2000, we inspected 30 homes, and we found the wood burning appliance was one of the principal causes of moisture damage, which led to mold because of the erratic temperature change. So it's a tough go, but that's my perception of it. And I would say seek a better appliance, better system for your community, wherever you are. And with the energy file, if you encompass all the good things about it, the home will cost $1.50 a day to run instead of $12 a day to run, and that's what we're finding here. But that's it. That's all I got to say about that. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Richard. And I think we're going to jump ahead right now to the question and answer, if anyone had, or are we going straight to the Q&A? Elena, I believe.
Yeah, so right now we have a little bit of time for Q&A, and I appreciate that people have been typing in their questions into the chat box, and folks have been jumping in with answers, which is wonderful. I think it shows how much knowledge we already have in the room. So thanks for those people who've jumped in with their responses. Are there any other questions that folks had who didn't type in the chat already that they would like to ask?
And if I might encourage, like we're documenting and recording this session, what the purpose of that is to gather information to make a stronger product. End of the day, that's something more economical, sustainable, affordable for our people. So fire away with the questions. We'll respond to them sooner or later.
Yeah, great point, Richard. So if anyone has questions that we don't end up being able to respond to in this session, we can always follow up, and feel free to email us too, so that we can connect with you afterwards. I don't see any other, oh, I see a hand up from Dre. Go ahead, Dre.
Richard, going back to your findings on wood stoves, is there a database that could be accessed so that that information could be shared? I know in a lot of our communities, we have a lot of the same designs built back in the 60s or 70s. So being able to access that information so that we could take those findings and apply them to the new homes that we're building, or even just to renovations that we're doing to existing homes. So any information would be great. Thanks.
I think our discovery and some of us that were worked on the NISI file, and perhaps Leo, we were privileged to take that with January technical training. But I don't know if there is a database, that collective database that has that information. But under the web page, there might be some information. Hope that helps.
Yes, Richard, that's right. Wood energy technology training certification, yeah, and so not only inspections but also for the installers, and of course the ongoing annual cleaning and servicing, and it is a pretty dirty source of fuel for sure. Another challenge that I think with all of this talk about energy efficiency and heating systems, the band I was recently working with had a pipeline explode, a natural gas pipeline explode right beside them. And there was a variety of different, there is there's some concern. People are worried, they're scared of natural gas and propane. So, you really start whittling down to just some very basic things. And I know our community did a community energy plan as well too, where we come up with all kinds of ideas. And I think that's a good approach, is to get some people that really know energy and who can do a little bit of research for you as well too. So that's what we did, and it's got a lot of good information to a starting point anyways. Yeah, anyhow, wood is not good.
Thanks, Leo. And I see in the chat too, Chris has made a note about the issue of chimney cleaning maintenance not being kept up. And Pat has shared a resource for wood stove safety that folks can check into. So thanks for sharing that.
Sorry, everyone. I've been taking my sweet time on these sections, and I just clearly love to talk too much. So diving into mostly the electrical appliances, lighting, and automation. This stuff is a little bit more straightforward anyway. So energy use in homes, we can see here, very simple breakdown. This is obviously generalized, but 50% space heating. So we spent most of the time on that. And then with, just over 20% here, so 23% between appliances, electronics, and lighting. So it's going to vary from building to building, and we have some control over that. But these areas are pretty easy to influence, which is great, and they're in the control of the homeowner for the most part. So I did want to note that appliances and electronics, that's going to include in most homes, depending, like if you have natural gas stove or something like that. But for the most part, it's going to be your kitchen appliances, your washer and dryer, and items like that, as well as plug loads is the electronics. So plugging in your phone, the computer we're all using, things like that. So just a quick diagram here to show you and this is all done by BC Hydro, so it's going to vary based on what you're paying region to region and how much you use them. But this is sort of the annual cost. So clothes dryer, pretty expensive. So that's why often you'll hear about hang drying and how that's an impactful solution to reduce that. A toaster, that's not going to cost you too much money. Neither is your coffee. I wouldn't give up coffee for $9 savings, and I wouldn't give up TV for $20 savings. But replacing your refrigerator is an option that can yield some savings. Incandescent bulbs, your computer, so doing things like setting a sleep schedule can help, and then your dishwasher. So if you can, extend the amount of time that you use between loads, that can also help. Same with enclosed clothes washers. So this is another chart just to show you the blue is sort of an energy efficient Energy Star model, and then the green as well as the blue. So the total would be the 2010 model. So it's just showing the relative impact of improving these areas. Going into EnerGuide and Energy Star, these are just basically consumer guides and rating systems. So EnerGuide, that's what you're going to see part of this Canada Green Homes Grant, which I hope a lot of you are looking into as an opportunity to receive energy assessments and rebates on the homes. Those are EnerGuide assessments, so they'll rank the building with this score, and you'll see, you know, this is a slightly below average building because this is the least efficient, and this is the most. This is a relatively efficient building. So this is a good energy use, and this is poor energy use. So it's closer to the solid side. Getting into lights, LED, we've heard lots about halogens, CFLs, and incandescents. Incandescents are the kind of old school, mostly gone. They light using resistance, and they're very inefficient, but have a very nice color quality. Halogens would be the next best color option, quality, more efficient than the incandescent, but have issues with heat. They give off a lot of heat. So those are the ones, same with incandescents, but you can touch those and pretty quickly feel if they are what we think they are and not LEDs. CFL was sort of the emerging technology a few years ago, pretty efficient. Probably not generally worth swapping out at this stage for LEDs, but at end of life cycle, I would definitely do so. They last longer. They do contain mercury, and then there's some issues with color quality. And then LED has sort of become the new gem of the lot. They've corrected some of the power quality issues, and it uses by far the least power, which I will show here. I find this to be kind of a cool table that shows you the specs on each of these. So if we're comparing, let's compare the 60 watt incandescent to the LED, you can see that the lifespan is 25 times the amount. So you can imagine the maintenance savings that you receive from that. Like you're literally buying those bulbs 25 times less. The price per bulb though is 20 times more. And you know, these numbers are general and maybe a little bit conservative. Like I bought some LEDs for quite a bit cheaper than that recently. And then the cost of electricity to actually run them. So because of the wattage, you'll see that the 60 watt incandescent is actually going to cost $124 to run for the same amount of time. It would cost the LED $19.73. So just something to consider that in the long term. I know it's tough sometimes to swallow that upfront investment to pay 20 times more for what is perceived as the same thing because it's just some light bulb, but the impact of that financially is quite large actually. So and I think now I'm tossing this over to Richard to talk a little bit about electrical, wire, tube, and knob. And I'll manage the PowerPoint, Richard. So if you just want to comment and tell me when you're done on this.
So this is probably the pristine age of 1930s tube and wire that you'll find in old types of homes. That's pretty much redundant now, but they're still out there in some places. So be cautious of them. Next slide. Aluminum versus copper. There's two types that of wiring that are effective. The most effective is the copper itself, but some places they have that Luminex wiring, which is a combination of copper and aluminum, which is back in the 1960s, and now changed to mostly copper. Copper around 12 feet. Next slide. Oh, panel amp, which is average home has about 100 amps. It's gauged on the appliances. that you have in your home, and there's different types of receptacles. One that's most common today is called the stab lock or the square D. But you'll find older types homes are way underpowered for today's uses, and that's where it becomes costly, and you have problems. Next slide. Commonly used piping: steel pipe, PEX pipe, copper pipe, PVC, galvanized pipe, brass pipe, and cast iron piping. And these
Oh, sorry, Richard. It sounds like you suddenly got muted. Are you able to unmute?
okay, I don't know where I left off. So the different types of piping. With copper pipe, we're finding it's a product called the Wolverine piping. It creates pinholes. So the PVC and PEX pipe are probably the most suitable replacement, but because of the galvanized pipe, you'll see it and sometimes integrated with PEX. So cast iron piping, and there's another water supply pipe that we don't see here, is that stave piping. It's got tar, and that causes problems. Next slide. Good.
Sorry, Richard. So Tom, was Richard going to cover the building inspections, appraisals, and hazards?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
So Richard, I'm just going to take you to this next slide. So site considerations and infrastructure.
Okay.
So I guess you could, if you could touch on sort of what some of the site considerations are on those assessments around drainage and sidewalks and fencing, and how they might interact with the house.
Oh yeah. So the building code is a minimum standard criteria. So with site drainage, I would say that keep it to what, 2 to 3%, and use your downspouts into a concrete pad that leads away from the home. Sidewalks, you have to treat them properly to prevent cracking. Make sure they're reinforced strong enough. Next slide. Understanding retrofit recommendation maybe attended for remediation strategy. Doing remediation with indoor quality is critical. What you have to watch for is how you manage moisture damages that lead to mold. What you have to watch for is properly fitting yourself with protective gear for even changing insulation or pulling insulation, because it's all airborne contaminants. Another thing that we're finding that is caused by moisture damage is the flow of our efflorescence, which is a contaminant that comes from concrete that affects people. So be cautious of what you're doing on those strategies. Make sure that you understand. Other thing about walking in and doing inspections into a place, understand what you're walking into by the approach. Learn to recognize what's happening in the building, and be cautious of the terminology and expression to the clients. What is factual that we know is a word that can get yourself into trouble by explaining in a different terminology the appearance of what it appears to be, not what it actually is. So be cautious of what you say to get customers to your clients. Okay, next. Common hazmat, mold, asbestos, vermiculite, floor tile, drywall mud. All these and many more, like we haven't got right on in here, many more. So make sure you get yourself up to date on your education part of it. Lead, yeah, good one, Leo. Good one, tar and lead also. So normally all the material under, if you look under the Underwriters Laboratory Canada booklet, you'll see some of them do have all these components, but they're okay. But once disturbed, they become airborne. That's what you have to be cautious of. Okay, next. Examples of failed building envelope. This picture displays vinyl siding in the west coast of BC. And you notice the black and white lines is called thermal bridging. And it's a good indicator that something's happening in that home. That's a telltale sign that the home is contaminated inside. So be cautious and make sure you have protective gear. But in most cases, even if occupied, be cautious of what you say or what the approach to providing information has to be well thought of and carefully said, because it become an issue. But this is a significant telltale sign that the white lines that you see, that's wood transpiring out to the outside, is called thermal bridging. And under the booklet of Underwriters Laboratory of Canada, vinyl siding is not deemed suitable for the West Coast. And most people don't know that, but contractors use it because it's a lot cheaper product to put on the building or to complete the building. Next slide. New building envelope. This is what we're doing here in Bella Coola. So we're using hardy plank with a range screen application. In this case, we didn't change the windows, but they're double pane vinyl windows. And you notice that the verticals, the wood verticals, naturally cedar from our forest. We're utilizing what resources we can to benefit our own building practices. The verticals and the hardy plank siding are maximum length, so we're minimizing waste. And the guys here, I'm teaching them building science and building technology, and it's what the new buildings look like. The other part of this is that you can insulate that cavity. So in the West Coast here, the wind-driven rain hits so hard that it'll saturate, go through the siding. But guess what? With the range screen, it'll drain out in the cavity that you created to the range screen application. And this also promotes your life expectancy of a home. So this particular cost, that 400%, was about $20,000 to do that market, but normally about 7,000. So really value added. Next. Is the vertical strip or cedar between windows conjoined? Yes, it is. The vertical strip is covering the joints. So if there's damages to the hardy siding, you just take the vertical strips off. They take the vertical strips off, and you can pull off the siding that's damaged. You don't have to pull the whole building apart, the whole facade apart, just the strips of it. Another component of that is the application. You notice the corners there, so the wind-driven rain comes in that direction, so the corners are lapped to prevent any ingress of moisture. Next slide. Yeah, it's all about planning, Cody. And this home is actually facing east, west to east. So the front, you see there's a huge buildup of moss, and it just saturates the roof cavity. And underside the roof cavity, you see a lot of moisture damage just because of the products. So selection of product is critical, and you don't see it here, but the roof vents there, we find them, they're problematic due. They're too short, they need to be longer. So the wind-driven rain at 90 miles an hour, it goes into the roof vents and drains inside the system. So we're changing those things up. But this is a telltale sign that in that attic space, and you look at the gable end vent there, it's too small. It's too small. So those building code references should be developed for your area. And, you know, I think that's one of the keys. And also the other challenge we find that if this roof was metal, we find that it gets too hot, so we automatically increase the size of the vents, increase the size of the vents on the gables. Another building, we did a retrofit in here, but you can see the product selected. You see the migration of moisture, the saturation of moisture that we have in the West Coast here. It affects our roof line. So selecting of the better product would be key, and proper ventilation to ensure that you have a consistent airflow throughout the building cavity.
I think that is the second last slide. So I will hand it over to Tom and Elena to kind of close things off here and manage the Q&A and closing remarks.
Great, thank you, Adam. Yeah, again, what's so great about this session so far is that questions are being asked, but people are answering them. So that's a great, a great model of what we all almost want to achieve here, really. We've had some good answering questions around grey water, some admiration for Richard's work as well. We have a message in the box from Dre, who asked, what kind of remediation efforts have people made in regards to moss on roofs? Yeah, he knows if it's done improperly, it can lead to obviously larger issues like that example which gave just earlier. And Leah's also provided some guidance and some recommendations as well. One thing that we're definitely going to do is capture all these links, this information, and in one space, and and add them all to a spreadsheet so everyone's able to access them. But yeah, Richard's sort of replied to your answer, Dre, saying that you can create spray and it can dissolve mold growth as well. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to bring forward, being mindful that we only have a couple of minutes left? But we're still very keen to capture a lot of your questions outside of this session. So if you had a burning question and it hasn't been answered, then please feel free to reach out to me or Elaine.
I'm just kind of following up on Chris's comment earlier, and from the research I've done, hardy board doesn't tend to shrink, but does it tend to expand at all? And maybe Richard or somebody else who's more hands-on could answer that.
Hardy plank, we haven't seen much movement on it. We've been using it for the last 5 years now. We haven't seen much movement on it. Even then, that we don't butt them in behind that strip of cedar. We don't butt them tightly together. We just leave a half inch or a quarter inch gap if there is movement. But the wood does expand and contract. So when we designed it, we made sure we went wood on wood so they expand consistently together.
Great. Yeah.
Gil Davies had a good question here, and I want to respond to that because I went to the factory here in BC, and that changed my whole perception of construction as a builder. But I said to the guys, I said, why aren't you using better products, right? And the cost difference wasn't that great, but we designed a few buildings here with that with modular system, and we applied the rain screen application. We got rid of the OSB, all the melamine, and used more durable products. And boy, oh boy, what a big difference.
Great.
Hi, this is Chad Paul from WFM.
Yeah,
like most.
You seem to have cut off there, Chad.
Hello?
Hi there. I think, yeah, you seem to have cut off there, unfortunately.
But we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Just on the Hardy siding question there. We exclusively use now Hardy siding on all of our band housing. We're retrofitting and taking off stucco and old wood siding, and replacing windows with vinyl, doing the energy upgrades wherever we can. But the one thing that, again, and I always fall back to this, is installation and the installers, and making sure that they understand what we're trying to achieve with the rain stream and stuff like that. Some of it is still new to some of these installers, old vinyl installers and stuff like that. So when it comes to the envelope and that, if you're a supervisor or foreman on the project or whatever, you really have to be diligent with these guys.
Thanks for that, Chad. Yeah, and these themes have come up throughout the session, around making sure that everyone's on board with these new practices as well. So I'll wrap things up here. And yeah, to start with, I just want to obviously thank everyone for coming down, taking time out of their busy schedules, and in particularly Adam and Richard Hall for speaking. Just a bit of a reminder that we do have some accompanying resources that we sent out. So in particular, the First Nations Home Energy Safe podcast, episode 1 is a great reference tool. And also, it also links to what we were talking about earlier, is that First Nations housing, improving Woodstone's safety in First Nations, as a webinar recording, which some of you guys might want to look into in more depth. The video has been recorded, and so the recording of this video, as well as the presentation slides, will be posted online and followed up within an email as well. And on there, we'll try and capture as much feedback from you guys as we can. Bear in mind that this is a pilot project, but we're trying to learn and capture those learnings as much as we can throughout. So the next session will be in three weeks' time. So that will be Friday, July the 16th, and that'll be running from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to try and capture all these links and information sources so everyone can get access to them. So we'll make sure to follow up with that. But thank you all for attending, and we'll see you in 3 weeks' time.
Thank you all. Great group of guys here. Great group of people. Hope you learned a lot, and now become our messenger and translate this message forward to your people and do something different. Do some positive changes in your community what you learned here. I think that's a step towards our self-sufficiency, of freedom, better housing conditions. Thank you all for attending. Great job, Elena, Tom, Adam.